9 hikers ventured into the Ural Mountains on what should have been a routine trek, but what they encountered was a nightmare so creepy that to this day, experts and investigators are still haunted by the unanswered question, what really happened on the infamous night of the Dyatlov Pass Incident? Igor Dyatlov was born January 13, 1936. Igor grew up to attend the Ural Polytechnical Institute, now known as the Ural Federal University. At the age of 23, Igor was a grade 2 hiker in the Soviet Union. Just for context, countries where hikes and climbs are common often use a grading system to let hikers know how difficult the trail will be to navigate. The grading systems today are much different, but at the time, grade 2 meant he was experienced in hiking trails that were considered to be in the easy to moderate range. However, Igor wanted to conquer grade 3, which was considered the highest grade, with climbs that toted the most extreme difficulty at the time. In 1959, Igor decided to make the long trek across the northern Urals and gathered 9 other grade 2 hikers to participate in the trip, meaning 10 people in total. Igor's group had come up with a route that would lead them to the far northern regions of the Sverdlovsk Oblast and the upper streams of the Lozva River. On January 23, 1959, the route was approved and the group was given their route book. Early January 25th, the group arrived by train in the town of Ivdel and from there took a truck to the village of Vizhai to spend the night. On January 27th, the group began their path toward Gora or Torton. At this point, Yuri had decided to withdraw from the group due to ailments and joint pain that left him feeling uneasy about continuing. But the other 9 would venture on. The group eventually came to a wooded area, where they decided to stash some extra food and equipment for the trek back. They had seemingly planned to get over the pass and spend the night on the other side. However, the weather got much worse at this point. The snow picked up heavily and the visibility was very low. This caused them to lose their sense of direction, and they ended up heading west towards the top of Kalatsiakal. Once they realized their mistake, they decided that instead of moving to a lower altitude, which would have given them shelter from the weather, they would just set up camp on the slope of the mountain for the night, and backtrack in the morning to continue their original path. This decision would turn what was supposed to be a heroic trek into a baffling mystery that still has people talking about it to this day. Before Yuri Yudin had departed from the group, he had a conversation with Igor. Igor had promised to send a telegram as soon as the group had returned to Vizhai, and this was expected to happen on February 12th, but Igor anticipated that it might take a bit longer for the group to finish the journey, so he told Yudin that the telegram would come a bit later. February 12th came and went with no telegram. Since Yudin had known there was a possibility of this happening, there wasn't any initial panic. It was expected that they would hear something in the days following. It's not uncommon for journeys this taxing to take a bit longer due to potential hurdles, weather, or injuries. However, by February 20th, nobody had heard anything, and it was clear that something wasn't right. The families of the hikers were worried sick at this point. This resulted in search parties consisting of both teachers and students that volunteered to help. In the best case scenarios, you'd expect to find groups struggling, but still alive and mostly unharmed by this point, surviving off of extra food and waiting for a rescue. Maybe you'd even expect that some wouldn't survive, but the majority of the group would make it home. But what separates this story from your average run-of-the-mill rescue is the unusual and haunting condition that the group was found in, which surely left rescue teams, friends, and family in horror and confusion, wondering what could have possibly happened to cause the scene that they had found. On February 26th, at Kalatsiakal, where the group had decided to spend the night, the group's tent was found first. The search party had no explanation for what they were looking at. The tent was empty and abandoned. It was now covered in snow, and all of the group's belongings were left inside, including their shoes. In addition to this, the exit to the tent was still closed, but there were several cuts in the side of the tent, one of which was large enough for a person to escape from. Footprints were found outside of the tent, and it looked like the prints were from bare feet, socks, and some wearing only a single shoe. Following the tracks led to the opposite side of the pass near some woods, where researchers found what had previously been a small fire. It appeared to have been started by the group members. This is where the bodies of Krivanashenko and Doroshenko were found. They were found without shoes and wearing only their underwear. Investigators noticed that some of the branches on a tree were broken, and they thought that a member of the group had tried to climb it in order to get a better view of the surrounding area. Between the tree and the camp, 3 more bodies were found: Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin. It looked like they were trying to make their way back to the camp, possibly to retrieve items from their tent. The rest of the bodies took over 2 months to find and identify. On May 4th, under 13 feet of snow, the remaining bodies were found located in a ravine. Rescuers found clothing belonging to the previously discovered group members on the remaining 4 bodies. Dobynina was wearing Krivonoshenko's pants, which appeared to be burned and ripped, and she also had a ripped jacket wrapped around her left shin, which also covered her foot. The first 5 bodies discovered were examined right away. Slobodin had endured a small crack in his skull, but it wasn't thought to be fatal. The examination determined that the causes of death for the first 5 bodies were hypothermia. When the remaining 4 bodies were found in May, they continued to confuse investigators and theorists surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident. 3 of these 4 bodies did in fact show fatal injuries. Nikolai had serious damage to his skull, and Dobynina and Zolotaryov had major fractures to their chests. In addition, Dobynina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips, plus some facial tissue and part of her skull bone. Zolotaryov was missing his eyeballs, and Kolevatov was missing his eyebrows. These body parts were said to have gone missing post-mortem, and could have had to do with the body's locations in the stream. It's important to note, however, that the damage done to the skull and chest of these group members would have required extreme force, similar to that of a car crash. As if this wasn't odd enough, high levels of radiation were found on 2 hikers' clothes. We aren't left with much beyond a plethora of unanswered questions, and the ever-increasing amount of time that separates then from now. The only people who could have told us without a doubt what happened were there, and they didn't survive. So what are we left with? A giant web of theories and speculations surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident presents us with explanations that scale from animal encounters to full-blown government cover-ups. The slow and steady footprints found outside of the tent after the group had cut their way out causes most people to dismiss the theory of an animal attack, which would have likely sent them running from their tent in panic. Non-violent animal encounters are a different story though. One theory is that a reindeer had simply tripped on the tent and fallen onto the group. If they had been laying side by side, this could explain the injuries due to the pressure, since the weight of a full-blown reindeer may not have been evenly distributed across every person, and in a panic, the weight would have shifted as the animal was trying to get back up, ending in an innocent but devastating situation. Needing to escape from the tent, they could have cut their way out, but if the reindeer wasn't attacking them, why walk down the mountain without any of their belongings? Many people believe that the group was forced down the mountain by weather, more specifically an avalanche. Keep in mind that the area that the group was in was not very steep. Dyatlov was considered experienced in hiking, so it's likely he would have been keeping an eye out for any signs of an avalanche. If the group had heard any rumblings, they could have decided to venture down the mountain toward the wooded area, start a fire to keep warm, and scope out the mountain from there. But that wouldn't explain leaving their clothes in the tent or cutting their way out. If there was a small amount of snow that covered the tent, this could have caused the group to panic, cut their way out, and leave things behind. On top of this, a matter of weeks had gone by, which could have been enough time for the snow to blow out of the area, leaving no signs of an avalanche by the time any of the bodies were found. For a while, people were pointing their fingers at a native group who lived in the area known as the Myuu people. The reason they were thought to have something to do with the incident is because the group was camping in territory that the Myuu people used for hunting. In addition to this, the Myuu people had a bit of a reputation. It was rumored that this indigenous group was also responsible for tying up a female geologist and throwing her in a lake in the 30s. Of course, this was never proven, but it's not far-fetched to think a group of people living off of a remote piece of land, looking to stay separate from civilization, wouldn't take kindly to members of civilization wandering into their hunting grounds. They were skilled hunters that knew the land well, and they would have had the upper hand if they wanted to harm the group without leaving a trace. But one of the main reasons that this theory was thrown out was that there wasn't a crime committed in the area for 3 decades. Yet there were other people in the mountains since then. So why would the Myuu people decide to attack this group in particular? In addition, life would have been rough in these mountains. So why would they kill 9 hikers and not scavenge their belongings? The Myuu people did, however, describe orbs of light in the sky around the same time the hikers were camping in the mountains. They went on to blame these orbs for the events that ended in tragedy for the group. This had people wondering if there were lightning orbs in the area. This phenomenon is known as ball lightning. and it consists of a ball of electricity that can hover around and in this case could have created the hotspot near the tent. It's not common to see lightning in cold weather, but it's possible. If this is true, it probably would have spooked most people. There was also a camera set up on a makeshift tripod by one of the hikers. Could they have been trying to observe something in the sky? And if so, would it have suddenly caused them to rip through their only source of shelter to retreat? Some theorized that high-ranking officers and military were butting heads with the KGB over use of military equipment. During this time, some military officers had taken a helicopter out to hunt with the help of Mansi hunters. Now, the theory states that the KGB knew about this illegal use of the equipment and wanted to get proof. So they sent Semyon, who had served in the military, to take photos of the helicopter to serve as evidence for the KGB. But in the process of taking the photos, he was spotted by the military personnel in the helicopter, and they decided to dispose of Semyon and his group. When they returned from their hunt, members of the military set out to find the group and came across their camp. When confronted by the military, the group, aside from Semyon, probably didn't understand what was going on and decided to push back. And Semyon knew the power of those who had sent him to get the photos, so he most likely wasn't willing to give up the camera out of fear for repercussions. This led to the situation becoming violent. It's important to keep in mind that the military personnel probably knew how to cover their tracks and take care of the group without leaving evidence behind, including external marks on their victims. Knowing that this situation could be detrimental to the military, the story was covered up. Would the Mansi people cover this up as well though? It's possible they were scared for their safety as they wouldn't stand a chance against the military. But if the group was approached, why would they cut their way out of the tent rather than use the same opening they used to get inside? The list of theories goes on to include Yetis, UFOs, and so on. And they all provide some sort of basis, but all of them leave questions without answers. So what happened to this skilled and ambitious group of hikers? I'm genuinely interested in finding the truth behind this case, and I'm willing to bet some of you may have some information that I couldn't find. So please be sure to fill me in. I'll be reading the comments. This is Fearbank, and I'll see you next time.